Coming to you from the studios of AM 950 KTNF, the progressive voice of Minnesota, and airing on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk. Welcome back to the Gailey Show. I am your host, John Parker. It is 33 minutes after the hour. Bill Hulseman is a writer, ritual designer, and former educator whose work explores identity, belonging, and personal agency. His debut book, 6 to Carry the Casket and 1 to Say the Mass, is a collection of deeply personal essays examining the identities we inherit, the traditions we navigate, and the power we have to shape our own narratives. A former middle school principal, teacher, and campus minister, Hulseman holds degrees in religious studies, the comparative study of religion, and educational leadership. His writing is informed by this background, as well as his deep love for pop culture, including Madonna and the Golden Girls, who helped him see himself long before the world was ready to. Hi, Bill. Welcome to the Gailey Show.
Thank you, John. I'm so happy to talk to you.
I have to say the Golden Girls is my ringtone. So we're gonna have to talk about
once upon a time, that was my doorbell. And it was really disconcerting in a party, you know, like people would keep ringing the doorbell, like one after the other. So you'd hear bum, 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 thank you for bum, 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 thank you for bum, bum, bum. Like it would never finish the song because people kept ringing the doorbell.
I would be one of those people like, just let it play.
Exactly.
I gotta hear it. All right. So your debut book. All right. Much of who we are is predetermined before we're even born, right? And so for a lot of people, maybe all people, but queer folks in particular, we find ourselves at some point, whether we're 12 or 62, having to challenge, wrestle, reject, transform that identity. Talk to me about tackling the identities that are birthed upon us.
Sure. You know, I think of identity as a tool, not as a fixed label. And it's a tool to help us know ourselves and help us know each other. It's a tool that we use to construct community. It's a tool that we use to deconstruct community or degrade community too. You know, we use identities as powerful and dangerous tools as well. But it's a tool nonetheless. It's not its own autonomous entity, right? So it's something that is given to us, but you know, any good gift shouldn't be an imposition, right? So I really believe that we can take the reins and we can shape our own identities. And I think, you know, when we're born into a family or a community, we're born into a particular set of identities, and then we find out really early that it doesn't fit, right? I think for queer people especially, we know in our gut at a young age that we're not fitting into the molds that are being presented to us, and instead we're written off. You know, instead of it being sort of a revelation of something new, like, oh, let's figure out who this person is and welcome them totally into the world, but instead we pigeonhole people, you know, and I think that's to everybody's disadvantage, not just the person who's being pigeonholed. But I really believe that we can take, when we know that the identity isn't serving us, we can shape it, we can create it, we can take the reins. And sometimes that means negotiating language with our families and our friends and our communities. And sometimes it means leaving those people behind, because if they want to trap you into a particular identity, then you're trapped, you know. And yeah, so I really believe it's a starting point to know ourselves and to know each other. I also think of identity as an identity as kind of a window. You know, if you're passing by somebody's house and you get to peek in the window, right? And some people leave the windows open and the curtains drawn, and some people have them sealed shut. And it's not my right to pry the window open. It's, you know, if they want to open that window to me, then it's my privilege to be able to peek in and get a glimpse into the person. So I think it's not just a matter of what do we do with the identities that were handed to us. It's what is identity in general, and where did they come from? You know, they don't just come out of the blue as a fixed robe that you put on and wear for the rest of your life. Identities grow from our experiences. They grow out of our relationships. They grow out of our values. And those evolve over time. And so why wouldn't our identities as well?
Mm-hmm. I can't imagine that you were thinking about the current political landscape that we find ourselves in as the LGBTQ community as you were writing the book. But it seems so timely to what we're having to be, what we're facing as a community from the administration, from the MAGA party writ large. How do you feel your book speaks to this particular moment that we're in?
I hope it speaks to this particular moment. The third part of the book, so the book is divided into three parts. And the first two parts, I dive into the experiences and the relationships that really shaped me and that continue to shape me. And I wanted to go back and understand, how I got here. And then, I started writing in 2020, and then 2020 happened, right? And I wanted to understand how we all got here. Mm-hmm. And so looking through my own experiences, it's a very narrow lens, but I think I was able to identify a lot of common experiences. And I'm really lucky that I grew up with the tools for reflection, and that I love making meaning out of things. And I think that's something that I was trying to do. And I looked around and I saw a lot of people not knowing what to do with the experiences we were all sharing in 2020. But one of the third part of the book I call Pride, and it's a little bit different. Each essay focuses on a different person or a book or a movie or a TV show that helped me shape my queer identity, right? So growing up, I didn't have any vocabulary. I didn't have any language to understand myself. I didn't have anybody in my family or in my immediate community who was queer or that I knew was queer. Mm-hmm. So I had no language for it. So I was kind of lost. But then once in a while you come across something and I would see myself reflected in it. The Golden Girls were one of those. I saw them as a chosen family. They're not a biological family dealing with those complications. They're a chosen family dealing with their own particular complications. And I remember as a kid thinking like, that's a cool way to be, like living with your best friends. Isn't that a different way to live? I don't have to be, get married and have 2.2 children. But when it comes to, and of course, Madonna was another one that even the first time I saw Madonna, I think it was the Open Your Heart video on like the local music video hour after school. I was in like 4th grade, and Open Your Heart came on, and there was something about that I was like, she gets me. Like she gets me. And there's that little boy who dances with her in the video, and it's a whole metaphor. Mm-hmm. But I always saw myself in that little kid. Like I want to be that kid. Not I want to be Madonna. I want to be that kid who's like besties with Madonna and dancing off with her into the sunset. But the third part of the book wasn't intended just to celebrate like lots of queer resources. It was my way of making Pride personal. I think one of the challenges that we're facing as a queer community now is that our primary celebrations, the big, Pride festivals, Pride month of June, and throughout the summer, all these festivals all over, in the last decade have really become dominated by corporate sponsors. Mm-hmm. And, in 2019, which is, the 50th anniversary of Stonewall, and 2020, which is the 50th anniversary of the first Pride March, I was walking through the mall and it was just rainbows everywhere, right? Everybody had rainbow branded to show that they were queer friendly, and it felt really, really hollow. I mean, it was, talk about performative solidarity. Because now a couple years later, now look what's happened to Pride, just in this past year with the corporate sponsorships pulling out. I think that's actually a good thing, because then it's fine. Let's get back to basics. What is Pride really about? For me, I wanted to make Pride personal. I wanted to step away from the corporate sponsorship. I didn't want commercials on television to tell me how to feel about being a gay man and how I should be feeling walking down the street, right? That's for me to figure out and for me to discern. So I started a daily practice during Pride Month of, I'd set some time apart each day and think about a person or a movie or a book that was really formative for me, that I keep coming back to, or that I read over and over again, or that planted a seed in me that I didn't understand until I was, out and loud and proud and all that later on. So I wanted to make Pride personal, and I think that's a challenge for all of us to figure out, like, how do we how do we reclaim what pride means? And, you know, whether it's, for me, it's a protest, or if it's a demonstration, or if it's a matter of personal reflection and personal evolution, right? I think everybody's got different goals. But the way forward for me is personalizing it, taking it out of the hands of the corporate sponsors, taking it out of the hands of, you know, capitalism, and then, you know, make it personal, make it our own again.
We're here with Bill Hulseman, author of 6 to Carry the Casket and 1 to Say the Mass, Reflections on Life, Identity, and Moving Forward. I think that for a lot of people, particularly those who are working within the corporations, trying to get them to be more inclusive of like employee policies and health benefits. And, you know, I think that there was the sense of, oh, we live in capitalism, and if we're getting these Fortune 500s, if we're getting these Fortune 1000s to finally, you know, be there, then maybe we've turned the corner. And I think it took all of our breaths away of how performative it actually was, that in a single year, they could all just yank that back, and that they hadn't actually changed at all.
Yeah,
that was very, and I'm thinking particularly of you, Target, headquartered here in the Twin Cities, that a lot of people have been working them for a very long time, 10 years. And the fact that they just walked away from that so quickly, and they still got sued by MAGA. But you see, I get started on that, and that's not what we're here to talk about.
It's all connected. It's all connected.
It's all connected. There is a idea that you also explore in the book about feeling ornamental in a big family. Unpack that for us.
I am the youngest of 10 children. A nice big Irish Catholic family from Chicago, but I had a unique experience of being both part of a huge family and also kind of having an only child experience, because the first 9 within my family were born within 11 years of each other. I mean, my mother was just, you know, pushing them out, and you one a year. And then there was a long gap, and there was a 7-year gap, and then I came along. So, you know, some people would be like, "Oh, you were a mistake." I said, "No, I'm a delightful surprise." And so I had this unique experience of both being part of this huge brood and having the big family experience, but also I was kind of an only child. By the time I was, you know, in grade school and middle school, all my older siblings were out of the house, you know, unless they'd come home between apartments, or if they were moving, you know, they'd come back for a couple months or something. But I was the last one at home for a long time. So I had a really different relationship with my parents. I had a really different relationship with them. You know, by the time I was born and by the time I was conscious, the family culture was already set. You know, the first 9 and my parents, you know, the dynamic was set. And so by the time I showed up, it was just a matter of catching up and trying to keep up with everybody. The word ornamental is, I don't mean to say I was systematically excluded. It's just I was peripheral. You know, I was on the side. And as a kid, or even as a high school student and a college student, if I said something within the, you know, when the whole family was together, a couple of people would look at me like, "Where did he come from? Like, who is that?" I was like, well, if you had taken time to get to know me, maybe you'd understand. Wow. I have something to contribute. You know, and I think that's pretty typical with a lot of big families. You know, and the older siblings, you know, have a really different perspective on younger siblings. But younger siblings, we see everything. We learn from all the mistakes of the older siblings. We learn from all of the successes of the older siblings. In particular, we learn how to, you know, navigate tricky relationships within the family. And so I learned that from my siblings for sure. But I'm not sure what they ever wanted to learn from me. And I always felt like I wasn't being tapped. Like, please help. Please let me contribute.
We are talking with Bill Hulseman, author of 6 to Carry the Casket and 1 to Say the Mass. I have to fit in a break here. We're going to have more with Bill when we come back. You can keep the conversation going and follow us on Blue Sky. We're at thegailyshow.org on Blue Sky. Be sure to sign up for AM 950 Radio's newsletter. Go to am950radio.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, and sign up for more from The Gailey Show and all of AM 950 shows. You are listening to AM 950 KTNF and WCPT 820. Welcome back to the Gailey Show. We are coming up on the top of the hour. I am John Parker. I'm here with Bill Hulseman, author of 6 to Carry the Casket and 1 to Say the Mass, Reflections on Life, Identity, and Moving Forward. It is in bookstores now. Something I want to ask you about, because we talk a lot about it on the show. And you, as a former campus, minister, and you've studied, religion, and you have degrees in it. Something we talk about on the show a lot is Christian nationalism. Can you talk to us about, because you have a lot of things in here that are pushing back on that. So maybe we can get your thoughts on Christian nationalism, but more within the context of your book and the reflection and the meditations that you offer to the readers as they're going through it.
I'm glad you qualified that, because I'd have to run off and quick do a PhD in Christian nationalism and come back and feel qualified to talk about that. But I can talk about, from my own experience and my own studies and my own teaching. One of the really big pieces of my academic background was studying the Holocaust and the history of anti-Semitism. That, the Holocaust didn't just come out of Nazi Germany. The Holocaust was the result of 2,000 years of systematic choices that marginalized groups of people. And it snowballed. And, at first it was religious identities that turned into racial identities when race became a construct that was a dominant in the vocabulary. And a key piece of understanding how the Holocaust happened too was how the Nazis were able to tap into that same sense of Christian nationalism in Germany. It tapped into really deeply rooted prejudices, and it doesn't just come out of a generation, right? We inherit those prejudices and we inherit the trauma of the generations before us. And so I can only see, the rise of Christian nationalism in the U.S. as a parallel to what we saw, in Germany and in Europe in the 1920s and 30s. I think what's most devastating for me is to think I did my degrees in this. I spent how long teaching and really intentionally laying groundwork for my students to be able to respond to things like this. Respond with compassion, respond with love, respond with a search for justice. And I'm a pluralist. I don't believe there's one right way to do anything. I think there are a lot of right ways to do things. And the job of society is for us to figure out how do we coexist and respect each other's boundaries without dominating them. And right now, I'm in a radical minority. Both people on the right and people on the left are taking really extreme views. Yeah, there's Christian nationalism on one side, but then there's also a really radical tribalism that's happening on the left too. Neither of those is a starting point toward peace for me. Neither of those is a starting point toward really a civil democratic society for me. I taught, I did a unit on genocide with my students for many years. And my goal wasn't to show, hey, this happened in the past. Isn't that interesting? My goal was to say, this comes up every generation. We see it in multiple places around the world. This is a human phenomenon. Why do we keep letting it happen? We know it's happening. When it comes to Christian nationalism, what I think is, it plays a part in that because it so blindly pushes aside the Christian part and prioritizes the nationalism part. Mm-hmm. I don't know how Christians claim to. I don't know how Christians claim this is a legitimate approach. There's nothing in Scripture. There's nothing in church teaching. Well, it depends on the church, I guess. There's nothing in my church's teachings that would suggest that, like a unified Christian nationalism, that not only holds power but also marginalizes others. I don't understand how that emerges. I really don't understand how that emerges. In the history of Christianity, for example, the history of Christianity and Judaism, they were both marginalized fledgling traditions, in their early, until the second or third century. They were being persecuted systematically. And now, and it didn't take long once Christianity became the religion of the empire, mm-hmm. Under Constantine. all of a sudden Jews were the only radical minority within the empire, and so they became, you know, the target for a couple thousand years. I feel like in the 80s and 70s we saw the language popping up, not necessarily just against Jews, but against queer people. We saw, you know, the rise of Anita Bryant. That's sort of an interesting marker to think about. She was able to be so vocal and so anti-queer. But that was the stirrings, right? It was happening. It was bubbling up from that part of the culture, and we saw it happening. And why didn't we do anything? Why didn't we respond effectively? Or why didn't the people in the middle, or why didn't people of real faith and religious conviction, why didn't they throw their foot down and say, you know, absolutely not? You know, I don't try to speak out against non-Catholics, because I grew up in the Catholic tradition, and that's where I really claim, you know, if I claim any authority on religion, it's within the Catholic tradition. And it's particularly scandalous to me what elected Catholic leaders have done, and appointed Catholic leaders. You know, think about who are the Catholics on the Supreme Court who are letting civil rights, which is civil rights is not a non-Christian thing. Civil rights is a very Christian thing. But here we've got elected and appointed people who are just trampling.
They are, and I cannot believe we're at our time already. I want to keep going. The book is 6 to Carry the Casket and 1 to Say the Mass, Reflections on Life, Identity, and Moving Forward. We have links in our show notes and on our website for you to get your own copy at am950radio.com or heartlandsignal.com. You can connect with Bill at billhulseman.com, HULSEMAN.com. Bill, we're going to have you come back and talk some more here, because there's so much to unpack. And I mean that for real. We're going to have make that happen.
I look forward to it.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for listening and or watching today. You can keep the gay going on all weekend long. On Saturday afternoon on AM 950, you can catch Twin Cities Pride Amplified at 3 p.m., The Illegal Trans Woman at 4 p.m., and The Downright Upright Show with Philip Anthony at 5 p.m. On Sunday at 11 a.m., tune in to WCPT 820 for Out Chicago. It's Sunday brunch with your gay best friends, Ella Miller and Scott Duff. Have a great weekend, everybody. See you back here on Monday, and keep it queer until then.